From the author of Spinsterella, a strange and unusual romance, and Spellbound, a darker shade of black, comes the legendary Magic Children. Pick up the conclusion of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. Over the last year, I've started to notice that the SJW cancer that poisoned Marvel and DC Comics is now starting to infect the television and movie adaptations of those comics. And the first symptom of that SJW cancer was announced with DC's Legends of Tomorrow. Now, on DC's Legends of Tomorrow, they have announced that Isis will be coming to the DC Legends team. And the reason why she's coming to the team is not because she has skills that will help the team. She's there because Mark Guggenheim, the producer of DC's Legends of Tomorrow, wants to make a statement to spite Donald Trump. However, in his attempt to make a statement to spite Donald Trump, he shows how racist he actually is. And he also shows how disconnected he is from history, because when it comes down to the Heliopolitan religion and the Heliopolitan faith, it has absolutely nothing to do with Islam today. And most people who are Muslim want nothing to do with the Heliopolitan faith or the gods of Heliopolis. So having Isis on the show not only shows how racist your Mark Guggenheim is, it also shows how ignorant he is related to Egyptian mythology and when it comes down to people who live in Egypt today. So that one thing showed me how the SJW cancer was starting to infect these DC shows. Now, the other thing happened last week when I was watching the second episode of the 6th season of Arrow. Now, in the second episode of this season 6 of Arrow, Oliver Queen decides that he wants to spend some time with his son, and because he wants to spend some time with his son, he decides to ask John Diggle, his best friend and bodyguard, to take over the role of Green Arrow. And with this taking over of the role, we're going to supposedly have a black Green Arrow. But this is SJW action all over again, because when it comes down to your SJWs and black people, they are extremely racist, and they often do things in a passive, aggressive way to denigrate the image of African Americans. And this is something that Greg Berlanti and Mark Guggenheim have done over the last 2 or 3 years with the introduction of Mr. Terrific. Now, your Mr. Terrific in the comics is one of the most toughest characters in the DC universe, one of the smartest characters in the DC universe, and one of the most skilled characters in the DC universe. He's right up there with Black Panther and Batman in terms of skill set. However, on the show, he has always been depicted as a homosexual, bumbling, stumbling idiot. And this adaptation is a passive-aggressive way of taking a jab at black men and showing that they are incompetent and incapable of being a hero on the level of a white man. And with people calling them out about the mishandling of Mr. Terrific in Arrow Season 5, in Arrow Season 6, they've decided Mr. Terrific will be competent. However, they found a new guy to passive-aggressively take a shot at black men with. And that guy is John Diggle. Now, John Diggle in the first episode had an injury to his arm that led to him being unable to really pick up his guns, and he also had a symptom of scared brother-itis. And what the scared brother-itis is, what they do is they project this stereotype on the black man that he's scared, he's not capable of doing his job as well, and then when he's given a position of high responsibility, like he was in that second episode of Arrow where Oliver asks him to be the Green Arrow, he can't really do the job. So they're going to give you a black Green Arrow passively, but aggressively they're going to show that he's not capable of doing the job. But this is par for the course when it comes down to your SJWs. Your SJWs passively talk about diversity and bringing people of color into different roles, but aggressively they do things to show that this person is incompetent and incapable of being a hero on the same level as the white characters. And this is what I see with the DC's adaptations as it relates to this SJW cancer. And this SJW cancer, again, is not about presenting you with a positive or a balanced image of an African American. It's all about breathing new life into old stereotypes and presenting black people in a negative light, but doing so in a passive aggressive way so that people will see this person in a negative way, see them as somebody not as a hero, and then ask for the other white character to come back. It's extremely manipulative and extremely passive aggressive, but those of us who can see through it see how racist these SJWs are and how their plans to promote diversity really aren't about diversity. It's all about presenting a negative image of people of color so that people will want to go flock to the white person instead. It's all about promoting white supremacy, but in an underhanded way. Now, the other thing that I have learned as related to this SJW cancer is related to Marvel Studios. And as Marvel Studios has gone on, I've started to see the SJW cancer start to infect its film adaptations. And that started with Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, Spider-Man Homecoming was supposed to be Spider-Man's first movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unfortunately, it was not a true adaptation to Peter Parker's story. No, what kept it from being a true adaptation to Peter Parker's story was the SJW additions in the name of diversity. And those additions in the name of diversity were all about promoting a story which is not true to Peter Parker, but it's all about making things appeal to all sorts of diversity audiences and checking off boxes as related to diversity and not telling Peter Parker's story. Because in Spider-Man Homecoming, yes, we got Peter Parker as Spider-Man. However, he had Miles Morales' story transposed onto him. And as they transposed Miles Morales' story onto them, we started to see how racist things actually were. Because to take Miles Morales' story and put it on Peter Parker is devaluing Miles Morales as a character. Moreover, adding his supporting cast was all a way of promoting stereotypes that made the white male character appear to be superior than the people of color. Because to give Peter Parker a fat Pacific Islander best friend, that was all about promoting a stereotype about Pacific Islanders. And all the other characters that were in the supporting cast who were of color, were all about promoting stereotypes about people of color, especially with the African guy and then the Michelle Jones and all these other characters. And they really did not fit into the story organically because the SJWs, they don't think about whether a character fits into a story. They want to try to create shoehorn diversity, all to try to promote what they call a rainbow. But their rainbow is filled with white supremacy because that's what really makes their adaptations really seem insincere, and then they feel really awkward and forced. And Spider-Man Homecoming felt really awkward and forced when we have a white Peter Parker in Miles Morales' world. We have all these minority characters, and the minority characters are just window dressing. They're just there to be an ethnicity, and they're not really a fully developed person because Liz wasn't really developed, Michelle Jones wasn't developed, and the friend wasn't developed, and no one in the story really came to life as a character. And what was really and a big affront was the only two black male characters in Spider-Man Homecoming were criminals. And again, that shows how racist these SJWs are, even though they preach tolerance and acceptance and wanting this diversity. But we see passive-aggressively their diversity is all about promoting old racist stereotypes about different ethnicities. And this SJW cancer seems to be further flowing because when I was watching some videos about Thor Ragnarok, here it is, one more again with this SJW cancer. Now, when it comes down to this Thor adaptations, I've always had an issue with the whole black Heimdall because when it comes down to Norse mythology is as white as it gets. And I really do not like people putting characters of color in places where they don't fit, such as with this Black Kid Flash that they've put in the comics, because Wally West's story
is a white, red-headed Midwesterner, and I do not like the whole idea of a black Heimdall for the same reason, because I always believe in the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and this is a principle I take into my own creativity, and I take it into it because I don't want anyone injecting white characters into my stories which feature core black casts. So I don't want to take black people and put them into stories that feature predominantly white casts. And when it comes down to Thor, as it was envisioned by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it follows the Norse mythology. And the Norse mythology, again, is as white as it gets. All those characters are white Scandinavian, white European, and I would like to see that cast on screen. And with Heimdall, I started to see a little bit of that SJW poison, but with Valkyrie, I'm really starting to see this SJW cancer start to infect Marvel Studios, because after Spider-Man Homecoming showed me nothing but SJW poison, here I'm learning is that not only is the Valkyrie, who was originally a blonde, blue-eyed white woman in the comics, now a black woman, she is now a bisexual black woman. So this was all not all about bringing a great character from the comics into the movies. This was all about needing some SJW checklist for diversity. And I don't want to see checklists for diversity in superhero movies or movies, period, because when it comes down to movies, they should not be trying to meet some sort of checklist for diversity. They should be about telling the story as related to that character, and if that story has nothing but white characters in it, then so be it. It has nothing but white characters in it, because when it comes down to the Norse mythology, it's all white characters. Just like in ancient Egyptian mythology, all those characters are black. So you wouldn't want to interject a bunch of white Egyptians, because that's not what people know that to be. Because we saw with Gods of Egypt and how that movie flopped, people were not accepting of white Egyptian gods, and they shouldn't have to accept black people in a place where they don't fit into the mythology, because that's not true to the source material. And when you start trying to meet diversity checklists in these type of adaptations, it really throws off the story and really prevents us from seeing these characters as they truly are. The Valkyrie in the comic books was a blonde, blue-eyed white woman who was a heterosexual female, because I remember reading numerous issues with the Valkyrie, and she was always flirting with guys and always talking to guys and always showed interest in guys. And this is something that's not meant to be homophobic, but is meant to try to keep these characters true to themselves. If you want to try to add characters into certain stories, you can do so in an organic fashion. I could easily see in Ragnarok, if you wanted to add a homosexual character, you could do so with one of the Grandmaster's entourage or some of these other ancillary characters if you wanted to add them. But there was no reason to try to put this in here and shoehorn it in an inorganic fashion. This is my big problem with these SJWs as it relates to comic books and it relates to these film adaptations, these television adaptations, is that they call themselves trying to add diversity, but ironically, they show the world how racist they truly are, because in their attempts to passively add diversity where diversity does not belong, they show how racist they actually are, because that whole attempt to make Valkyrie this black bisexual woman is passive-aggressive, because it's an attempt to try to make Gila, Kate Blanchett's character, appear to be more attractive, because they want the white woman to be on the pedestal as the pinnacle of beauty, and because they want the white woman to be on the pinnacle of beauty, they have to passive-aggressively find some way to devalue the beauty of a black woman. And that's something that, when it comes down to these SJWs, they do all the time, because your SJW, as I've stated on numerous videos, is the biggest racist in the room. And because they are the biggest racist in the room and the biggest bigot in the room, they often preach one thing and then practice another. And what they practice often winds up alienating people, because they see the truth about the racism they're promoting and the racism they're pushing. Now, when it comes down to all this so-called diversity, the only solution really to it is to create new characters, but these SJWs don't want to do that because creating new characters requires hard work. And they don't want to go through the process of creating this new character, introducing this new character, and then building an audience for this character. So they try to shoehorn diversity in a place. And when they shoehorn diversity in a place, all it does is alienate large audiences of core customers. And those customers don't want to buy these movies or these comic books because these comic books are no longer true to their source material, and they no longer are telling the story of this character. All they are soapboxes and mouthpieces for SJWs to promote agendas, and disingenuous agendas at that, because it's not all about creating actual diversity, it's creating a false narrative regarding diversity. And that false narrative, all that false narrative does is promote old stereotypes that racists had many years ago about people of color and people of different sexual orientations. And those stereotypes are detrimental and destructive to people. And this is the one thing your SJW doesn't see, because your SJW often comes from a very paternalistic point of view. Was there a place for a black character in Arrow? Yeah, there was, because if you had did the real Mr. Terrific, he would have been awesome on screen. Was there a place for John Diggle to replace Green Arrow for a while? Yeah, you could have done that story and it would have been organic. Could you have brought ISIS into a Legends of Tomorrow? Yeah, you could have done it by introducing a show where they went to ancient Egypt, or they ran into Andrea Thomas in the 1970s or so, or just brought Andrea Thomas onto the show based on the old Filmation stories, and you would have done that in a very constructive manner that would have been done organically. It didn't have to be about spiting Trump. All it had to be was about telling a good story. And the same thing with Spider-Man. You could have brought in Robbie Robertson or Betty Brant characters, or no, not Betty Brant, Glory Grant, black characters who were already there. You didn't have to create new diversity characters like Michelle Jones. You could have used existing characters that were already there. And the same thing with Thor. You could have brought in Horus, Isis, and Osiris, who were already established in Thor comics, and you could have used Seth as the villain because Seth has been a villain in Thor comics, and all of this could have been done in a constructive manner that really would have added some diversity to these television and cinematic universes, and would have really gotten viewers into the characters and made them more appealing, because this is something that would have been taking some time with research. But SJWs, they don't like to work one, and they don't like to do research, so they'd rather just try to shoehorn things in and force things in. And when they do that, they wind up turning away audiences because they're all about promoting rhetoric and things related to what they want and not giving the customer what they ask for. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you'd like to try some of my SJS Direct Fantasy titles like the ISIS series, the East-Team series, and the Temptation of John Haynes, or you want to try some of my goth fiction like the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.